All right, thank you very much for being here today. I hope you guys are all enjoying Dev Days. My name is Connor Malone. I work at Valve on the Steam business team. The world of video games is changing, and every day, new, innovative, creative content is being released. And it's never been a more accessible time to be an independent game developer. On the flip side, though, the market is incredibly competitive, and being an independent game developer is a very risky business venture. To that end, video game publishers can provide funding, tools, and assistance to help game devs succeed. So the goal of this panel is to talk about and provide knowledge and insight as to whether or not you as a developer should consider signing with a game publisher, and if you do that, what you can do to maximize that relationship and have a mutually beneficial partnership. So joining me today to help are these four gentlemen with a wealth of industry knowledge and experience. And we're going to hopefully just provide some really informative value and help you make some smart decisions. So go ahead and introduce yourselves, guys.
I'm Nigel Lowrie. I'm a partner at a small game label called Devolver Digital.
Hi, I'm Kramer, and I'm running a games company since 10 years, and hopefully I can answer some good questions for you.
I'm Schall, Digital Distribution Director at Sega.
Tom Buscaglia, the game attorney. I've been representing independent developers for a little over 25 years.
Great. All right. So first things first, I just kind of want to throw out, how would you guys distill the idea of a healthy games relationship with a partner, or between a developer and a publisher, into a couple key components?
I think that it's hard. We talked about this a little bit. I had a little insight into this question, and it's really hard to do something like that. But I'd say respect. It comes down to respect for each other's skill set as a publisher and developer, and what you can and can't do has a lot to do with how a healthy relationship is going to follow through. And then open communication. It seems obvious, but through good and bad, having great, open, honest communication. If things are good, if things are bad, if things are late, if things are going swell, having that kind of open communication is going to set the stage for every other possible thing you could think of when it comes to a healthy relationship.
I think that developers and publishers alike should contribute to the game on a similar scale, on a similar level, and they should be passionate about the game in every regard, and should be as passionate as the other party, and that makes the whole contribution a lot better for everyone.
Yeah, I'd say passion is very important for both sides, not just in wanting to be successful, but also in the quality of the product, and trust as well. You know, take it. Yeah.
Well, everything's been used up. You know, I do think that it's important to have flexibility in the relationship as well. The best games are made through iteration, and having, in spite of wanting to have some parameters that everybody understands to base the relationship on, it's also good to know when to flex and when not to. It can be real helpful.
Okay. Taking a step back and thinking about it from the terms of being an indie developer, what are some of the business challenges that are really facing the indie scene right now, and how can those developers kind of make up their mind, should I remain independent and pursue this game on my own, or do I need assistance in order for my business to succeed?
We're just going down the aisle, down the row every time? All right, I got it.
Yeah, we
You're gonna get
let's
screwed at
start
the end
this
of
one
this,
at
by the
this
way.
end, and then we'll be out.
Yeah,
by the time
Tom,
we
take
get over
this
there.
one.
I forgot the question. No, I think that, you know, years ago, let's say 4 years ago, people would ask me, my clients would say, you know, we wouldn't even think about using a publisher. And that was mostly, it's kind of odd that we're doing this at a Valve conference, because in a sense, you know, Valve changed the game for everybody, especially the publishers. There was a time before that where if you didn't have a publisher, you couldn't even get to the marketplace. Steam gave everybody direct access to their end users, which changed everything. And it was really nice there for a long time until it succeeded so much. And now, if you saw the chart at the in the initial keynote, there's over 500 games being submitted. Is that a month or a week or a day? I don't know.
Month.
Yeah, but discoverability has become a huge, huge problem. I have clients who've released, I know there's this myth that if I make a great game, people will play it, but the reality is if you make a great game and nobody sees it, they're not going to play it. And what did you say? How many games on sale this week?
The week-long deal said 430 something.
Holy 400. It used to be you put your game on sale, you'd get attention. Over 400 games on sale. So all of a sudden, the ability to just put a game out isn't enough. And developers are really good at making games. And publishers have a certain set of skills that a lot of developers don't. The ability to market a game, the ability to create demand, the ability to cross-promote. And I think these are the things you have to take into account now. It's a different role. Certainly funding is important, but I think really the more important things is assistance with discoverability and user acquisition.
Yeah, funding has changed rapidly with digital distribution, right? So it's not just a publisher that can provide the funding needed or all the funding needed. And discoverability is the issue. I think that desirability, we talked about this a little bit, is a massive issue now because setting yourself apart, there's a lot of games. And yes, there's a lot of games, but a lot of businesses have very competitive landscapes, right? It's can you do something that's genuinely different, that's attracting people's attention? Not necessarily everybody. I mean, it can be niches, and there's an audience to go after, and just making sure that, I think the biggest issue has always been quality, right? It's just so focused now on that. If you have something unique and different and high quality, it'll rise to the top, whether it's through discoverability changes on something like Steam, through Twitch broadcasters, through word of mouth. It's oversimplifying it, but having a good game is still the #1 thing that's going to set you apart. I think people losing sight of that is a problem, and trying to do things, add features, just because I think it's going to sell more games.
Yeah, and when I speak to some devs and they want to know some hints and tips on what to do, how to get on Steam, not only is the simple stuff on how do I get my game up on Steam, that's a technical conversation. It's quite an easy conversation to have. It's what's happened once I've launched. What happens now? I've had my launch, I've done my effort, I've done my self-publishing, my self-marketing. I don't know what to do next. And that's where we can offer assistance.
Preparing for success and preparing for failure. They haven't thought that far ahead necessarily sometimes.
It's that planning. It's having a long-term plan. Very much at Sega, we don't launch products and just think, yeah, here's our launch window and we're done. We've got strategies for games going, that have been released in 2010 that we're still releasing content for now. It's important to do.
I think it matters to understand what kind of company you want to have. And if you just want to focus on developing games, you definitely need a publisher. I mean, if you self-publish, you're busy with so many things that have nothing to do with developing games. So you need to understand, what do you want to do? Am I able to do this? Do I have the right people to do this? And do I have the finances to do this?
And how can developers recognize that they are maybe not doing that? Maybe they get to the point where they've released a game on Steam and all of a sudden the sales numbers aren't where they are or where they expect them to be, and that's when they realize maybe I haven't done enough on the business side of things. Is there an opportunity there that they can rebound, or what?
There is, and then at the point that conversation seems to happen it's one of shock that it was quite easy to launch my game. It was quite easy to put it up on Steam. It's quite easy to press that button and open the sales doors. Oh, right, what happens now? It's okay. This is how you need. In most cases, some cases, we'll debate that. It's whether you.
I think part of it is that it's really hard to make games, and the people who make games are very dedicated, very passionate, and very focused. But a lot of times they get gopher holed down in the little cave where they're making their game, and they don't look out. They don't check the business landscape. They don't look at the marketplace.
They don't look at a release calendar or something.
Yeah, like the guy who was working on a DS game for 2 years and then looked up and there was no DS. It's oops. And I think part of that is just not taking your business, and this is interesting because the Steam conference actually this is in a lot of ways just a business conference. There's not a lot of design tracks or anything like that. And I think that the people here probably realize that business is important, but taking it as seriously as you do your game design. And I'm kind of assuming that the game we're talking about is good, that it's
Yeah.
high quality, and that people would play it if they played it. And that whole thing. The other thing is that the new influence, this influencer BS that's making everybody crazy, and the advent, I thought games were supposed to be interactive, not something you watch somebody else play. That's a whole different panel, isn't it? But you bet, if you were looking at the marketplace 2 years ago, there weren't influencers, there was barely YouTube players, and there certainly wasn't Twitch streamers that had hundreds of thousands of followers that could really make a huge difference in the success or failure of your title. So I think you have to be aware of what's going on. You have to treat it very seriously as you do anything else in your studio.
Along those lines, like we've talked about, what can you do to recover? But I think, I don't know, it's just my opinion that to the question of like, is it too late? You realize I haven't done stuff. I think in a lot of ways it's too late. I mean, yes, there's things you can do to try and maybe recover out of it, but it's so crucial for developers to have a plan beforehand and have a strategy, whether it's by themselves or with a publisher or a partner, an advisor. Because once your game's out, and if the reviews, user reviews, are well, but it's just not selling, there's a reason for that. And yes, there's maybe a small window to recover, but I think that if you haven't planned for what you're going to do with both success and failure, that window closes very rapidly because there's 500 more games next week coming out.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
I think you guys are both are saying that you have many release dates, but you only have one release.
Right.
And I think that matters. You need to get it right from the beginning.
Wonderful.
I think one of the advantages of this is something we were talking about when we were talking about doing this, and that is you're going to make mistakes. Anybody who launches a game is going to make mistakes. The thing is, if one of the advantages that I can see of working with a publisher, and I kind of thought there should be a question mark on this title, is that publishers are releasing 10 or so games a year, maybe 6, maybe even 15 or 20. So they're making those mistakes, no question about it. But they've also already made a bunch of them, and if they're sharp and they know what they're doing, they're learning every time. So you can kind of take advantage of that as well as their unique skill sets. And I think that's kind of a difficult thing to match as an independent until you're on maybe your third or your fourth game.
All right. So if you're in that position where you're developing a game and you've come to the realization that you do need help and you want to seek out a publisher, what are your steps? How do you go about that process in a way that is going to best benefit you as a developer and as a business?
Do you want to go first? Because you've been through it both ways.
I actually missed half of the question because of that. Because somebody else first.
Sure.
Well, from our side, I suppose turning the question around is how do we find content?
Right.
And, we've got a team of people out there who go around and look at stuff, and there is a constant queue of content coming into us. So, make contact with the publisher, ask the question, be it shows, be it places where publishers may well be, and show off your stuff and have a great game. That's another thing which gets you noticed is, you might not be selling as many as you wanted, but I'm sure you've been noticed because lots of publishers spend a lot of time scouring through Steam. Every day, my team will be talking about games that are appearing on Steam all the time and sharing things, and hey, look at this is cool, and just constantly, trying to get in front of people, I suppose. But from a developer side, yeah.
I think from a developer, when we receive pitches, whether they're just meeting people in an event or an email, the first step before they talk to anybody is to distill down their game to something very digestible and quick. Okay, this is just my opinion. I realize this is for everybody, but like the 50-page doc doesn't help me. The 2-page doc with a video, a playable, a GIF, 2 GIFs, whatever. I mean, we've signed games we've seen on Twitter before with a GIF, right? Because it was so digestible, you knew everything about that game just by looking at it very quickly. And in this age of video content and Twitch, you're going to have to be able to do that anyway. So take those steps first so that when you approach a publisher, you don't say, well, it's like, Call of Duty mixed with Rocket League. And you're like, okay, what the hell does that even mean?
That'd be a good game.
Yeah, it's actually pretty good. What do you guys think? Anyone want to make that? I'll sign that at the door tomorrow.
But people used to be very good at this. It was, before the advent of direct marketing or the direct access to the end users, you didn't have a studio if you didn't know how to do a pitch. I remember years ago, I was involved in a white paper for the IGDA about how to pitch your game. Because if you didn't have a one-pager, which is what we referred to that, and a pitch deck, which is a short, maybe 10-slide presentation of what your game is about, then you were immediately branded as somebody who didn't quite know what the hell they were doing when they went to a publisher. And I had a client, he said, oh, you're going to PAX East, can you see if anybody's interested in our project? And I said, sure, send me a deck. And he sent me an art book, which is not a pitch deck. And I think the problem is, and he's already got a game out, it did pretty well, to hundreds of thousands of users, but he's never done a pitch to a publisher. And you have to put yourself in the shoes of the publisher and say, okay, what do they need to know to consider it? Because, like you said, you get stacks, right? I've seen publishers at GDC would do, 20-minute back-to-back meetings for 4 consecutive days. Okay? Imagine what you have to do to stand out in that environment. So you need to have some thought into how you're going to do your presentation. You need to know what you need, which is something that is really important. What do you need? Do you just need distribution assistance or discoverability, or do you need some money? How much money do you need? Are you being realistic? There's a whole bunch of elements, but you need to be ready with that before you talk to the publisher, as opposed to, you see, and I know you've done this, you see a game, you like the game, you say, well, that's great, you're looking for a publisher, what can we do for you? And they get this blank look on their face, well, I don't know, it's just, which is...
Sometimes the developer may not know what they need. And we've had conversations about, the sort of modern way of selling games, and you bring up tax and fraud and security and all this stuff, and a lot of people are, whoa, terrified me because I've not really thought about it. But I'd suggest researching the publisher, because every publisher is going to be different. We're different to other publishers because of the way we try and approach stuff. So it's try and find out a little bit more, like a job interview. You'll research the place you're going to go for a job interview. It's exactly the same sort of thing. Find out if it's turning up with a surfboard and an earring, or do you have to put on a suit and deliver a 48-page PowerPoint. It really is what's going to be best. So try and talk to other devs that work with that publisher as well. If you want to really know how to succeed, it's, well, those guys did it, so maybe they'll talk to them. I'm sure, just the same as we talk with devs will talk with devs. It's fine,
Do your background check on who they worked with before, that publishers work with before. Talk to them. Do your history on the, check on the publisher. Look at Steam Spy. See how they've done. And then find the people that were successful and push them aside. And go talk to the people that were unsuccessful, maybe, because you might find that they had a fantastic time with the publisher. Yeah. You might find it was terrible, and there's a reason it was, unsuccessful, or however you want to phrase it. I think talking to other devs is huge, because they want to talk to you. They want to tell you their experience. Totally agree there.
It's the same with releases. You have one single try, and it needs to work out. I mean, you need to put the effort into your pitch, and you need to understand who you're talking to. And you can do so much research on a company you're talking to, and what kind of preferences they have. And of course, the further you are in development, the better, of course. If you show something that is playable, if you show something that is enjoyable, that's just going to increase your chances.
Yep. All right. So in this case, you found somebody. You found a publisher that's interested, and they're excited about what you have pitched to them. What are some common mistakes or things that maybe inexperienced developers overlook when they decide to sign with a publisher who is offering them what seems like a great deal for their game?
I think getting too excited is a problem. Like you said, they're excited. Getting too excited about that, it could be a problem. Look at keep your options open. That publisher may drop out of the running on their choice or your choice, so you don't want to be left just talking to one person, right? Just all the eggs in one basket. And don't be intimidated, and don't be overly excited at the same time. Just try and be cool about it, because I think that too often developers will be excited that someone cares about their game, whether it be press or otherwise, and you just get a little too focused on it. Keep your options open, and make sure that you do your research. Don't just get excited because Sega wanted to talk to you, even though Sega's fantastic. But maybe keep talking and making sure that their options are open and you're not too excited about just because someone is interested in my game right now.
Yeah.
It's easy to happen.
Yeah. We are awesome, I agree, yeah. So it's just, but from a point of view of going to speak to another publisher, it's to make sure that, you understand as much of that agreement, whatever they're going to put in front of you as possible, get advice and get support.
Yeah, I don't think you make the decision you're going to go with a publisher until after you've negotiated the entire deal.
And what does that look like?
That's the last decision you make. You just make that decision when you put ink to paper. Before then, it's a negotiation. I remember a situation a couple of years ago. I actually had 2 publishers in contract. And we were working out the details, and one of them was insistent on retaining the IP, the other one wasn't. And they got all rigid, and the other one was a little flexible, so we ended up going with them. But it's really intoxicating after you've been working on a game for 2 years to have somebody say they really, really like it and they want to help you bring it to market. It can blind even the brightest stars,
Yeah, I think there's a responsibility as well from our side. I mean, just if we go to, say, PAX, we go to PAX and I'm there with a colleague and we drop by a booth and leave our business card, we're quite mindful that actually that person may suddenly see this big business card and get really excited about it. We're just saying, we think your game's cool, let's talk. There's no, it's making sure people don't get overly, overly stuck on, I've been, this is the route I'm going to go down. It's keep an open mind and talk.
If you get your first offer, you will be excited. You will be super happy about it. It's the dream coming true finally. But you need to take the time to think about it. You need to take the time to reflect on it and make sure it's really the deal you want to make. And sometimes it just makes sense to say, all right, it's a cool offer, but it's not going to work out for us because it's not the right publisher, it's not the right environment.
Tom, in your example, you mentioned IP was a sticking point, intellectual property. Can you go into a little more detail about how that's a really valuable bargaining chip for developers and kind of?
Well, if you look at the existing top-level independent developers, and I'm talking about Valve, for example. I used to talk about id Software, but they're not independent anymore. But one of the ways they built value in their companies was by owning their intellectual property. Now, in some cases, like with Epic, the intellectual property is both their game properties, which they could then sell to Microsoft if they wanted to, say, or their technologies, which they then spun off into a whole separate business and have done tremendously well with. So the retaining control of your IP, not just ownership, and this is a real clear point. There are a group of, we may as well put this right out, there are a group of bottom feeder people out there that they claim to be publishers and all they want to do is steal your ideas and take every benefit and turn you into contractors with no benefits. So, and they're out there, and there's a lot of them out there, and they call themselves indie this and indie that, so there's no guarantee there. But one of the things that I see in those deals is, well, they let us keep our IP. Well, they let you keep your IP, but you license to them in perpetuity, exclusively, royalty-free, all of the rights that surround the ownership. So if you give away all rights to your intellectual property, but you still own it, you basically own a vacant property because you can't do anything with it. So it's not just retaining the ownership of the intellectual property, it's retaining the control of the intellectual property rights. And in the process of negotiating a deal with any publisher, you want to keep any intrusion onto that proprietary relationship as minimal as possible, sometimes because of your lack of bargaining power or the necessities of just trying to keep your studio alive. You have to give in on things, but you don't have to give in on everything. You should give in on as little as possible and fight every time. And please negotiate on your behalf, not on the publisher. I get this from developers all the time. Well, I don't think they want to agree to this, and I always say, look, let them negotiate their deal. They run a business. They're a successful business. They know how to negotiate contracts on their behalf. How about you find out what you want and negotiate on your behalf? And the other thing that pops into my mind is they're all really nice people. All of them, even the snakes are nice. All right, but you gotta look at the deal, not the people.
Okay. And so you've kind of mentioned, are there instances where it is okay if you need to give up your IP, like, or
If you have, like,
is that the last case scenario?
a lot of it, we're trying to do in an hour things that are very complex. So I will say this, and Chris, we were talking about this the other night. There are some times where your game and the IP don't really matter. It's a single-off thing. There's no sequel rights. Nobody's going to want to make a cartoon out of this game. So if you have to do it to get the funding to make your game, then maybe you do. Ideally, you retain all the rights. I've seen deals where, for example, ancillary rights, which would be rights to use the characters and other intellectual property in things other than games, which would include everything from action figures and lunchboxes to full-length feature movies, right? A lot of times, I could see giving them a license to that as well, if they have the expertise and the network that enables them to exploit that much better than you could, all right? But still then, it's always as little as possible to get the deal and always pushing back at every opportunity.
Don't give up controlling interest. That's the biggest part. If they want to give a piece up because someone can turn it into a movie, fine. But don't give up controlling interest because you don't want to, even if it is just a one-off, you don't want to wake up tomorrow and they've made a match 3 puzzler, out of your IP. It's going to feel bad.
Oh.
And so, my recommendation is it's not even on the table when you're negotiating, if possible. We work with certainly a smaller group of developers and just the size of the studio. I think that's crucial if you're a small studio and have something that blows up, that you have not just controlling interest, but you own that IP outright. I would keep that off the table and during negotiations.
Yeah.
And if they want it, maybe talk to somebody else, is my opinion.
And, from our point of view, it's not really something we're interested in acquiring.
Yeah.
We want to create a relationship with someone who wants to work with us again, and for us to grow that relationship and nurture it and have a long-term successful roadmap. And I think going in too hard can probably spoil that. So, we have a huge success rate recently with stuff we're doing.
That's nice, but it still happens all the time. Sequel rights. People ask for sequel rights. They will try. There's 100 ways to tie up a studio that a publisher may try to use, especially. And honestly, a lot of these old school guys that were doing this back when they had exclusive access to the marketplace, there's some of these cats around, and they have the same attitude. And I say, all you guys got is money. We got a game. You got nothing. You sell games for a living, and you don't have a game. We have a game. So lose the attitude. And a lot of it is attitude. It's.
So, okay, moving on. We'll imagine we're in a space where you as a developer have successfully negotiated to your satisfaction with the publisher, and everything's humming along until you hit a snag. Development runs into an issues, and maybe you miss a deliverable date or something. How do you approach that sort of situation where something that was working well now is facing an issue, and it could be breach of contract, could be something very serious or has the potential to be serious? How do publishers view that when developers run into situations like that?
I think this is what we were talking about earlier with open communication. Like, it should not get to, hey, we're going to be late on this milestone the day the milestone's there, because that's just bad communication and bad trust. That should be communicated weeks, if not months in advance. Hey, we're lagging a little bit behind.
Okay.
So you can start adjusting, saying, okay, maybe this is the things we need to do. Maybe we need to skip this PAX, because doing this PAX is going to make you 2 weeks to do a demo, 1 week of travel, 1 week of recovery because you got sick as hell. And then the next thing you know, that you're a month behind. So you need to plan these things out in advance and communicate with the publisher, the partner, well before that happens. And that needs to be in the contract of what happens when it is delayed. You don't want to find out that, hey, guess what, game's going to be 6 months late. Then that publisher, you're going to find out who they really are, I think, because they could force some bad things to happen and start taking away things like pieces of the IP or change the revenue share, because now you're in a bad spot and you're halfway through a game that's going to be late. So I think that these conversations need to happen during the agreement process and also during development well ahead of time. You should never get to the day of a milestone and going,
I think you have to keep in mind that the contractual relationship starts when you sign the contract. It doesn't end then. And contracts should be, anytime there's a variation on the terms of the contract, it ought to be, it should be codified, an addendum slapped on. It's not a big deal. If you have an idea to make the game better, you want to be able to talk to your publisher about it and maybe get some more money and more time. The thing that I think a lot of people get confused about is that if there's a delay in a production schedule, yes, it's difficult for the publisher, but it's killing the developer.
Right.
Because, oh, our game's going to be a month and a half late. That's 6 weeks of overhead and burn rate that you're eating. So, and as much as the publisher doesn't like this because it's screwing up their release schedule, you're killing the studio. So, of course, you build in projected delays. The other thing that can be problematic is you submit a deliverable to a publisher, and the publisher then either finds something wrong with it and sends it back, or just is very slow in approving it. And normally you don't get. They have to actually affirmatively approve a deliverable before you can invoice for it. That often can create delay that's very detrimental to the developer, because then they have to either self-fund or try to figure out how to work around that. And then there's a delay between the approval of a deliverable, the submission of an invoice, and then it's not uncommon for publishers to want to have 30 days or even 45 days to pay that. So you're dropping a deliverable and you may not get paid for 30, 45 days. I mean, the better ones pay when they get the invoice, and it's done all the time. Microsoft is like that. If they approve a deliverable, you get a direct deposit in your bank the next day. But if you look at their contract, that's not what it says, and other companies are much slower on it. And you need to be taking that into account when you're working out your delivery schedule, and also when something goes south and you go to your publisher and you've got to say, look, we're going to need more time to do this. And I guess the other one that's kind of weird is when publishers start asking for more features and not wanting to pay for them. When they start becoming game designers. I know you don't do that. We talked about this, but some of them do. They have.
I design all our games.
Yeah.
I've heard
you're brilliant too. No, but they'll sign it. They'll get a producer who's somebody who knows spreadsheets or something, or sometimes has no qualifications, and then they're going to help. They're going to tell you how to make their game, or they'll get their marketing department involved in helping you design a better game, which is always a disaster.
So how do you, as a developer, kind of protect yourself against that, or if your partner, your publisher, is trying to say, hey, we want you to do this and this and this, like, do you just have to go back to the contract, or are there other avenues?
You have to know to say no. It's way more common, the bigger budget titles with independents, when you get into 7 figures, you tend to get more of this, because the stakes are higher, the risks are higher for them. They're trying to protect their investment. They've got a lot on the line. They want it to succeed. And I don't doubt that all these stuff are good intentions. What do they say? The road to hell is paved with good intentions, or with bad publishers.
I mean, you have a contract, and a contract is for both sides. So your publisher has to apply to it, you have to apply to it, and this is what you're talking about. This is respect. Right. And if you respect your developer as a publisher, you will keep to your promises and you will keep to the contract. As simple as that. And if you work with a publisher who's not doing that, he's the wrong publisher. Simple as that.
That's a really salient point, though. That contract, I think a lot of us, especially the developers I talk to and work with, the smaller ones, they look at that contract as like, okay, what am I signing off to agree to get that money and those resources from the publisher? But you got to look at it, as you said, it works both ways. It's to protect you. You need to be looking at those point 1AB and making sure that it isn't just there to protect the publisher, it's there to protect the developer as well. So it always works both ways, hopefully, whether it's a milestone being late, it needs to spell out what's going to happen there, not here's the penalty, here's the penalty, here's the penalty. It needs to spell out, okay, in case it's a month later, 6 months later, something like that, these are maybe the terms we agree to, that 6 months of development costs equates to an additional revenue share, something like that for the publisher. Or maybe there's a 3-month leeway or something like that. It needs to, I agree, it absolutely has to work both ways and look at it as something that protects you as well.
Okay, and one of the things that we kind of talked about along those lines earlier was it does seem like there's a tendency for developers to kind of be afraid to exercise some of those rights in their contract. Why do you think that is? And maybe, James, do you have any insight as to why they may not want to approach you as a publisher?
Well, not particularly from experience. It's collaborating and communicating between the publisher and the developer, and that, from the experience I have, that seems to be route to success as opposed to too many problems that, not encountered.
Okay.
I just think they want to be liked. I mean, virtually every one of these contracts has or should have an audit provision. Maybe it may not be necessary if all you're doing is selling through Steam, because you can track it all through with the Steam sales and all the data they give you. But normally there's the right to go in and audit their books and make sure that the determination of what constitutes net revenue, which is the part that's divided between the publisher and the developer, the things that are deducted from gross revenue to determine net revenue, that they're properly calculated, and then that the money's been distributed appropriately. And this is you can do it once a year, and it's a little costly. If there's more than a 5% or 10% error, usually then the cost of the audit goes over to the publisher. But developers just don't do it because they don't want to be seen as being difficult. And to me, maybe I'm just a contract kind of guy, but enforcing your contractual rights is not being difficult, it's just being professional. And if you feel that there's an issue there, you should be checking on them. I was on a panel with Mark Rain from Epic years ago, and he said on one of their first games, they did an audit. And it turns out that they'd spent a lot of time negotiating a very, very narrow definition of net revenue, and that the publisher they were working with, who shall remain nameless, because I don't remember mostly, had been using their accounting department. There was no malice involved. Their accounting department had been using the standard net definition that they use in all their contracts. Well, they'd gone through all this work to negotiate a better deal, right? And it amounted to hundreds of thousands of dollars that they'd been shorted because, and if they hadn't looked, they wouldn't have known. So, you want to trust your publisher, but it's still your responsibility to take care of your own business.
I think it's a matter of experience, simple as that. I mean, publishers are usually way longer in the business than developers are, and it's your first deal. Of course, you don't want to mess things up, and publishers are so long in business, and they're self-confident. They have experienced people, and you're like this little developer, you're doing your first project. Of course, you're not trying to make things more difficult than they should be, but thing is, as a successful business person, you need to understand that you need to go after your rights.
And you need to understand them as well. I think that's also really important, is a lot of stuff on a terms document may be a bit confusing, or it may be a term that you've heard and you don't actually understand what net means. I know people out there, I've come across people who don't actually know what it means, and they're too afraid to ask, right? 'Cause I don't want to sound like I don't know what I'm talking about. So when it comes to getting payments and things like that, and this is just across commercial experience, not a publisher developer thing, it's purely just an understanding of exactly what are the maths of that deal that you've done. Just work it out very simply with one unit and just figure it out, that what does that mean I get? Because that can sometimes be a confusion. Certainly in my past role with working in retail, and you're selling, bringing stuff in, and there is a confusion there on what exactly are these two terms, and neither party has gone out to con one another. There's just been a complete misunderstanding of what that meant compared to what that meant, and it does add up to hundreds of thousands of dollars in some cases. So just make sure you double check whatever the maths are, and just look into it, use one unit, and just figure out, right, that means that. Okay, I understand.
Ask somebody else too. I mean, there's other developers that have been through this. Just if you don't want, if you're too maybe intimidated or didn't have time or whatever it is, ask another developer. They'll tell you. Especially the smaller developers that go on a forum. I mean, they talk about it. So if you don't know what these terms mean or you think these terms have too many clauses in them, you should ask somebody else. They'll tell you.
But the confidentiality provision says I can't talk about this.
You don't have to. No one is going to know.
Yeah. It's okay. You speak hypothetically. Well,
Right.
hypothetically, in
Hypothetically.
a situation like this.
Yeah.
Well, if in question, just talk to experts. I mean, you don't need to provide the exact details in many cases. And if you're talking to a lawyer, I mean, you can share your information. That's perfectly fine to do so, and just talk to these people. There's nothing wrong at all to talking to lawyers or talking to business experts about questions you have. Actually, it's your responsibility as a company owner to do so, because you need to reduce risk for your company, and you need to act responsible. And you need to act responsible, especially when it comes to your employees. And if you just take risks that are totally unnecessary because you're not talking to other people and they would lovely to give you that advice, then it's just gambling on the future of your company and the future of your employees, and that's just not right.
Yep.
Great. Chris, I'm going to direct a question towards you, and then I think it would be valuable to open up the floor to some audience participation. So after we maybe make it through this question, if you wanted to ask something of our panelists, go ahead and make your way to the microphones in the aisles, and we can take that route. So Chris, you've been through this on both sides. You've developed games for publishers and now independently. If you were to go back and work with a publisher again, how would you use your experiences and your knowledges to make the experience different, and what have you learned from it?
Well, I would like to put something in front of that. I think a lot of developers need to understand that they're not developing the dream game, and they should not developing the dream game. Instead, they should developing the dream team. The team is responsible, the team is the value, and the team is going to deliver your product. And the better your team is, the better your product will be. So get it out of your head that you're just trying to make this one single game you always wanted to do. That's not going to happen. The more people are involved in the game development, the less influence you have on the game. So, and this is one of the things I would be happy. I would love to know before I was starting a company and running this business. That it's really more about finding ways to find real good people that provide you the knowledge, the experience that you need, and that you need to understand that your company is something organic, and that needs to grow, that needs to be maintained, and as your question again, sorry.
All right. Well, we'll start over here.
Hi, I want to ask a question that because the publishers are sometimes more familiar with the market and they can get a lot of information from the feedback and the communities. So how can we decide how deep should the publishers get involved into the development of gameplay? Thanks.
So I can help with that one. We have a lot of experience and we have a lot of understanding because we've got 400 SKUs on Steam. That's a lot, and that's a lot for us to learn from, and we understand a lot. However, when it comes to game development, that's for the developer. Okay, we'll provide as much backup and as much services that we can to enable the developer to make the best game they can. It's not for us to design the game or get deep in at all. We can offer advice and feedback, but development has to be part of the developer remit. Publishers, we can do what we do, but game development's that side.
Yeah. Of course.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. From a developer perspective, of course, they shouldn't get involved at all. But I think it depends very much on the kind of experience you have. I mean, there are good producers out there. There are people with a lot of experience, and they can share a lot of knowledge with you. And as I said, it's not about making your dream game. So just listen to the advice you get, and don't be shy to ask about the opinion your publisher has and about the opinion your producer has, and reflect on that. And maybe it's worth listening to them. Maybe they're right. Maybe you're wrong. But you're only going to figure it out if you listen to those people.
I was to say, there's a lot of knowledge about the marketplace that the publisher is going to answer, right? They've had experience, but that market's changing. But you should, there's the ability for them to look at what they've done in the past based on the genres they've worked in and the type of games they've worked on that provide a lot of insight. Now, the game itself, yeah, I agree. Let the game developer make it. As you said, the services the publisher might provide, like gameplay testing, QA testing, taking it out to events, those will certainly help influence the design of the game, but don't let the publisher necessarily tell you what. They have their own personal opinions. I would turn every game into Red Dead Redemption immediately, I'm sure. But just listen to what you guys and what your community says, and use that publisher to find more information and find more data, rather than asking them directly what they would do about the game.
Thanks.
Over here?
I got to say one more thing about that.
One sec.
Every time I've seen a publisher's marketing department get involved in helping to make a game better because they thought they understood the market, it was a disaster for the developer. Publishers only know what happened. They don't know what's going to happen. And if you want your game to really succeed and be a hit, you got to know what's going to happen, or you got to just be lucky enough to hit what's going to happen. And they don't know that.
All right.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. Thanks. Over here.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi. I was wondering kind of what elements go into some of these contract talks, like sort of at a AAA level, is it any different, the stuff that you're giving up or the stuff that a publisher wants? What exactly does an indie publisher want in terms of control of the game, or in terms of IP control, in terms of maybe revenue sharing or stuff like that? Like what are, I've never seen an indie game publishing contract. It's not something I'm that familiar with. So what are the different elements that make it up, and what should I be expecting if and when I talk to a publisher?
At the base level, they're probably not too dissimilar, right? I mean, the things that you're asking for and the checks and balances in place.
The numbers are different.
The numbers are quite different, I'm sure, yeah.
In what way? How are they different?
Well, I think the scale of, obviously the funding, right? The funding of the game itself, the marketing that goes into that game, the testing that goes into that game, just the pure numbers of the production are going to be probably pretty different for the most part. On the other pieces, though, that you asked about, it's my belief that IP should be retained with the publisher, with the developer. See how I did that? I almost slipped one by you.
That's a publisher for you.
The IP should stay with the developer, okay? And that's especially, I think, on the indie level. I think that's so important. And then creative control, I think, needs to stay. Not just creative control of the game, which is hopefully pretty obvious, but creative control over marketing, how your game is presented to the world, and how your game is talked about, and your ability to say no to, you don't like how this is going to be presented. This is something you've been working on for 10 years maybe, and so you need to make sure you maintain creative control of the marketing. So there's little pieces like that. The revenue sharing, those are all individual. I couldn't tell you, to be honest with you, because they're all individual cases, and the amount of risk that you, the developer, have put up, and I, the publisher, have put up vary greatly. You may have just started this project. You may have been working on this project for 5 years and blew your life savings and your sister's life savings on it, right? Yeah. So that's a lot of risk there, and you should be able to recoup that risk. And so those vary wildly. But I think that at the base level, making sure you maintain control, the word control I think is important, is really important in an indie publishing contract. The differences between the two, though, hopefully are very minor after that. The ability to how to get out of a contract, how everyone's roles and responsibilities, I would think pretty similar in a sense.
I think the elements are all the same, but I think that, I've seen 26, 27-page publishing agreements. I'm sure yours are not 27.
It's 5, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So
the last page is just a picture of me.
Yeah, a lot of that is, like with a company like Ubisoft or Microsoft, they've gone through so many iterations of their every time something goes wrong, instead of rewriting their contract, they just add more crap to it, and eventually it turns out like bloatware, like Windows. No, but it's just got way too much stuff in it, but you don't want to bother going through. You don't want to pay a lawyer to take all that stuff out, so it just sits there. But also with big budget things, like I don't know if anybody saw it, but somehow or other again, I think it was filed in the Activision suit that Weston Zampella filed. They filed the Bungie contract for Destiny, right? Now that is a 10-year deal for 3 main titles and a bunch of DLC, and it's a $500 million contract. And there are definitely tied-in obligations to do this game. But Bungie retained, to their credit, they retained the intellectual property rights, although they're pretty much handcuffed to Activision for the duration. There are issues there that you don't have to deal with in an indie contract, obviously. Right. And even Microsoft's standard publishing agreement, I know that Chris Charlo did a great deal with ID at Xbox, where he pared their contract down to 6 pages, but it used to be 26 or 27 pages.
Okay.
And what I just saw the click-through agreement that Sony has for becoming a PlayStation developer is, I think, 47 pages.
Wow.
It gives me a headache, and I read this stuff for a living. It's
great. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll go over here.
Hi guys, my name is Jose. I'm from Headless Chicken Games. My question will be, one of the things that Latin American developers have been dealing with is that when we approach a publisher, well, as you guys said before, it's never too early, but most of the time it's always too late, because the game that they're expecting it to be at 80, 90% already completed. And most of the time, at that point, they say, hey, well, yeah, the game is almost done and it's not fittable. And so how do we reach a point where we could start early so we can work something out that could benefit both you guys and us? What do you guys look for? What do you guys see first? Is it art, or is it music, or is it gameplay, or is it like a really complete vertical slice? How do you reach out in order to be able to get something that could get you interested?
I don't think it's a specific thing. I think it's dialogue and talking to people, and I wouldn't say a game is ever too late. Even a game that will be out and released, there's still stuff that is interesting to do things with, because we could do something with a game that's released and then maybe build up to a sequel, and that's the strategy. So from my experience, I wouldn't say there's a specific, time and point where it's going to say, it's too late, or too early even. So just if you can reach out, then reach out.
I'd say the game, it depends on the game, right? So gameplay, just to use examples that I'm familiar with, Hotline Miami was just pure gameplay. There was nothing else in there. Just 10 levels of this is how this loop's going to work, right? So it explained that game very quickly and succinctly, and you could see where the fun was. Depending on your game, that may be something like narrative. It may be the visuals. Maybe the visuals are probably the most striking part of it, and this is what you're building it off of, or the rhythm, or whatever the case may be. But you got to find out, you got to define, what I was going back to earlier, define your game what it is. And when you're at a state when you can present that and say, this is enough to learn about my game, that's probably a good idea, and also to present it at that point. And also, don't think of it as a one-time pitch. I think that sometimes the danger is people build up and they say, okay, I got a meeting with game publisher X at GDC, and this is my big stage. And you know what? Maybe take that opportunity, or an earlier opportunity, to say, hi, this is the game I'm working on. Here's a little bit about it. Not quite ready for playable, and I'd like to show it to you maybe at E3 next year, or at PAX, or just send you a build. Don't think of it as a one-time job interview. Your only time to ask the prom date out, right? It's maybe a conversation that happens over 6 months or a year.
Or years.
My last page.
The other thing is, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
That it's also it's really not too late. I have clients who have games that have been released, and a publisher comes to them and wants to, oddly enough, the strangest one lately was publisher wanted to do, my client had digital distribution across all consoles, all platforms. This publisher came to him, they wanted to do a retail distribution on his game. They want to put it in a box and put it in stores. No downside, right? It's just maybe, and it's nice to have a box. But also there are publishers who will go to somebody who has a PC release and say, we'd like to port this over to the PS4 or Xbox or whatever. So the fact that I don't think it can be too finished to talk to a publisher. You may be talking to the wrong publisher. And they have a portfolio of titles. They want to have one of these, they want to have a diverse number of titles that don't compete with each other. So if you go to somebody with a certain genre of game, and they already have a game in that genre that they've backed and that's going to be released in the same period of time as yours, they're not going to talk. It doesn't have anything to do with your game. It has to do with their overall business model and other things that are impacting their decision-making process. So don't take it to heart. And there's plenty of publishers out there, aren't there?
So my last page was 2 pages long. Most of it was milestones. What I want to tell you is build relationships with publishers. It doesn't matter so much how your pitch looks like or how far your game is progressed, what kind of game you make. You need to trust, to build a level of trust with publishers. And if you have that trust, it really doesn't matter. I mean, the better your relationship is to your publisher, or the more publishers you have to work with, the easier it is for you to get your game signed.
Great.
Thank you.
We'll go here.
Hello.
Hi.
So I guess I'm asking, thank you. I guess I'm asking this mostly from a developer that isn't quite sure whether or not they need or want publishing yet. So from the perspective of a indie game studio that has already released a successful game and has the time and money to make the next one, what is the main benefit of a publisher as opposed to a marketing company, which is really what they need help with the most would be marketing?
Yeah, so I would say fraud, security, IT support, creative, not just marketing, commercial. There's a whole range of services which you may suddenly need. Fraud is one that, if you work outside of Steam, will impact you. You might not be aware of it, but you are certainly being impacted by it if you're, providing Steam codes elsewhere in the world. Tax, advice, financial advice, HR advice, all that stuff can help you progress. If you feel you've got the requirements and you've got the everything that you need to keep going, then keep going. You don't need it. But if there becomes that sort of level of mystery with something that's keeping you up at night, then you may need someone to assist. But that's for you to decide.
Thank you.
I think you should do it yourself.
Shut up, Tom.
What? I'm sorry. No, if you've got if
You should,
if you've
actually.
had a release and it's and your studio is branded,
Yep.
and you have a following. I mean, the first round of indie developers, I don't think they need publishers because they are established. Second wave, pretty much are in a pretty decent position. More in the last couple of years, it's the whole environment's changed. But if you've had a successful game, if those people liked it, and if you've established a relationship with that community and can tap into that for your next game, then maybe PR is enough, or maybe finding somebody to work with you to get you on the console platforms, for example. If you're not doing that, that could be a very good relationship.
What I'd like to add is that if you go with a publisher this time, doesn't mean you can't go without a publisher next time. So
Right.
Yeah.
if you don't have the knowledge, if you're not sure if you can do it on your own, publisher might make sense. A marketing company, on the other hand, doesn't understand the market as well. They can't provide you feedback. They can't provide you insider knowledge. They don't understand sales as much as publishers do. So there's a lot to learn. And maybe you take that information, that knowledge with you for the next game.
Yeah.
And you need to do the same amount of vetting of a PR company as you do with a publisher anyway.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
All right, we've got time for one more question. For those of you who are still in line, come find us after the show, and we'll try to help you out. But we'll go here.
Okay. Hello, gentlemen. My name's Eric Langkamp. I'm with Exalted Guy Interactive. My question actually builds on Jose's question. when you were talking about the stacks and stacks of different IP that you have to go through, when you're looking at those potential IPs that you're going to back, do you find it more attractive to find one that fits a specific mold you're looking for, or are you looking for the next trendsetter?
That's a great question. People have described Sega recently as being the big strategy powerhouse. And we're a big strategy powerhouse at the moment because those are the games that we've recently released. We're still looking at doing other things, and we're interested in stuff. You know, if something looks good and it is good, and it's, you know, fits with, you know, our company, and people are internally are passionate about it, then that becomes something that's interesting to talk about. Sega in the past, I mean, we're going back 10, 15 years, was a publisher that wanted to be in every genre, so would fit things in every genre, and didn't really succeed at that. You know, and that's because it needed to be passionate, and what it was doing was putting products in a hole because that hole needed filling, as opposed to saying, let's make this really good game, and let's partner up with these guys because we think we can release something that the public are going to enjoy, people are going to enjoy, and then we can create a strategy and lifespan on that product. So that's my feeling on it.
Yeah, I'd say at Devolver, we don't particularly look for a genre or you know, what we think is going to be a trendsetter necessarily, but there are, when you're pitching and researching publishers, depending on the genre of game or the type of game you have, some do fit better than others. There's publishers that work very well with point-and-click adventures, right? And they know that market very well, and they have a built-in audience already for you and your game. So you need to look at, you know, what type of game you're doing and maybe cater to those publishers, and as well as you could talk to the ones, you know, that have like an eclectic mix. But there might be someone out there that fits a little better because they know this market upside and, you know, up and down.
And I suppose another point coming back to that is about discoverability. And if you've got a product that you think, oh, that sort of fits with that other game that publisher's got. Now, within Steam, you can then, as a publisher, sort of try and communicate to people through your own products, which adds discoverability outside of Steam, which is very important at the moment. So you can try and think, well, I've got a game here, and that's sort of similar to that thing over here. I'd love to go and talk to that consumer group, and I can't do that on Steam specifically, but that publisher could, so why don't I partner up with that publisher? And then I can talk to their consumers, and we can both be successful. And that's another thing to sort of think about as well, is the audience you're talking to, and if it fits. So think about the publisher more than the publisher thinking about you, I suppose.
I sure hope you take a chance on original IP that doesn't fit in a genre from time to time. You know, because as an industry, we need it. And there's so much cool stuff that hasn't been invented. And yeah, it doesn't fit in a genre, but I think it depends a great deal on the particular title. If you see something and it's not like anything else before, but you love it and it's fun, I think you'd be making a big mistake to not back it because it can't put it in a box. I think what you should do is show it to the people at Wired Magazine and get them to do a feature on it, because they're not going to do a feature on the next RPG. You know?
The important part is none of us know shit, to be honest, right? We really don't.
Yeah, we're all guessing.
You can go look at, during one of the keynotes, it was an opening slide of some of the popular games, and I wake up with cold sweats at night thinking, would I have passed over Stardew Valley if it was pitched to me? I probably would have, just because it wasn't my type of game. And so just because you think it might be a little different or it doesn't fit and it isn't following a trend, I wouldn't be scared of it. I mean, there's games that just rocket into the stratosphere or even have modest success, which to one or two person studio is a huge success. Yeah. So I wouldn't be scared of, walking outside the trend lines.
If you think you're doing the next trendsetter, do it yourself. And I mean, publishers will come to you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.